It seems that the forces in the church today, those with the loudest voices and the most access to the bishops, can't help themselves. They want everything to be political. They want the bishops to wade into secular politics. I covered last week this inane story of the U.S. bishops now hosting a novena for the laity as a thin mask to put pressure on the U.S. government to restore their illicit grant funding for migration and the rest of that subject. How they're essentially co-opting the gospel and co-opting prayer and Catholic devotions and things to restore their funding for things that the general public is opposed to and that runs afoul of the actual teachings of the church. We now have the Catholic media aligned with Cardinal Supich, Cardinal Tobin, and the rest of them, putting pressure on the most moderate bishops of all of them, the highest profile moderate bishops, to use their opportunity with lawmakers that they have to try to get their illicit funding. Everything is political. Everything has to be political for them because politics is their gospel. Political power, political funding, materialism. This is part and parcel of the crisis in the church today and has been for decades, ever since Pope Paul VI took the papal tiara off and set aside in a symbolic gesture, the temporal power of the Roman pontiff. This has been a problem ever since then, where you have open calls for political alignment with the secular authorities, as opposed to the church, even when it's unpopular, saying this is what the gospel teaches, and these political authorities are doing the wrong thing. Now they try to do the same thing, but in such a nakedly partisan way that no one takes them seriously. The most moderate of all moderate bishops, for my money, is probably Bishop Robert Barron, somebody who I've never hidden the fact that I'm not exactly the biggest fan of. He has said some theologically troubling things. Sometimes they get taken out of context. Sometimes they're not taken out of context. But he has brought, through his Word on Fire ministry, a lot of people to Catholicism. You cannot possibly deny that. And in so doing, he has done really good work. But he's also a strident opponent of the traditionalist movement. We tend to have a sort of a love-hate relationship with Bishop Robert Barron. We like the work he does with the gospel, have some problems with his theology, and definitely take some umbrage with things he says about traditional Catholicism. That all having been said, he is far from being the most offensive of the bishops, and honestly is would be a natural ally in more normal times to those of us who want to bring back the belief in the real presence and the offering of the Mass in a reverent way, and the Mass being offered at least in keeping with the documents of Vatican II and how it says the Mass should be offered, because no Masses virtually anywhere in the church are. Natural allies. Unfortunately, we don't live in a time like that. But it is interesting to observe, nonetheless, how the worst elements among the laity are being, voices for the other bishops to try to pressure him to do something really dumb, which would be to politicize his Word on Fire ministry, because everything in the time of Trump must be political. Every single thing. During his first administration, I may have covered him once or twice at that time on this channel. It's already been very overwhelming, the amount that I've had to cover him because of the antics of the U.S. bishops. This all goes back to USAID. This goes back to Catholic Charities, their federal grant funding, and all the rest of it. These guys cannot quit politics, and that is unfortunate. So go to the National Catholic Reporter, which is a Catholic in quotes, news outlet that has been told explicitly by the U.S. bishops to stop calling themselves Catholic, to take the name Catholic out of their name. And they have ignored that injunction against them for decades, because they are the worst among the worst modernist news outlets. We go there for this headline. Editorial: Bishop Barron goes to Washington. Will it be Word on Fire or a smokescreen? So the context here: Bishop Barron was invited by a member of Congress to attend the president's address to Congress last week. And when we say address to Congress, any other year but the first year of a president's tenure, it would be a State of the Union address. And so technically this is not a State of the Union address, even though also technically this wasn't Donald Trump's first year as president of the United States, but because of the unusual nature of how he has served, this isn't counted as a State of the Union address. For all intents and purposes, it was. And he was among the guests. I didn't see him in the gallery. The cameras didn't pan on him because outside of Catholic circles, nobody knows who Bishop Robert Barron is for the most part. But he was a guest of a member of Congress. And he offered Mass for Catholic members of Congress before the event. That's the context you need. Because, as you'll remember, the first 36 hours, 48 hours of the Trump second term, what did we have on display for us? Trump and Vance went to the National Cathedral where the bishopette, the lady bishop of that Anglican cathedral, used her homily to lecture the president and the vice president on the hot button topic of the day. She did that, causing scandal in international headlines, and modernist progressive Catholics were clapped like seals for it. Not the appropriate place, and it's generally inappropriate to lecture the president of the United States at a mass. But here they're calling for Bishop Barron to do the same thing, and this is after the fact. But watch what they do here. This is incredible. Go to the article. Quote, Bishop Robert Barron, founder of the juggernaut Catholic media organization Word on Fire, will be, or did, step into the flames of our national politics today, both as a special guest at President Trump's first joint address to Congress since being reelected and a celebrant of a mass for federal legislators prior to the speech. From a distance, the invitation appears to be a curious occurrence coming from a freshman member of the House of Representatives, Representative Riley Moore, Republican of West Virginia, to the Bishop of Winona, Rochester, Minnesota. However, the two connected. Barron said he is grateful for the invitation. I look forward to this opportunity, both as a Catholic bishop and as an avid student of American history, he said on the X social media platform where he has nearly 325,000 followers. Invitations into the corridors of power can be perilously seductive. Certainly Barron, with all his internet savvy and understanding of U.S. history, is well aware of the pitfalls. Perhaps he is grateful for the propitious opportunity to speak truth to the powerful in this daunting national moment. To date, he has been oddly silent about the issues that are of greatest concern to his brother bishops and his pope, meaning migration. Maybe he was just waiting for the moment that would provide the greatest effect. Homily helps are abundantly available. Let us offer a homily help to His Excellency. It is rare that the heart of our gospel speaks so clearly and unambiguously to current politics. Let's pause here. Look at the phrase he used. The heart of our gospel. Our gospel. Not the gospel of Christ. Our gospel. I will remind you that the new synodal religion, this post-conciliar Vatican II modernism, is a false gospel, what they promote. The heart of our gospel. Note that language. As representative of the U.S. Catholic Church, Barron need only refer to the various statements issued by fellow Catholic leaders on behalf of immigrants, as well as those about Catholic efforts to aid the most desperate in other parts of the globe. They flesh out the gospel in real time. Archbishop Timothy Broglio, president of the U.S. Bishops' Conference, listed what he called deeply troubling elements of the president's agenda: the treatment of immigrants and refugees, foreign aid, expansion of the ultimate penalty the state can impose, and the environment. These policies, Broglio said, quote, will have negative consequences, many of which will harm the most vulnerable among us. Should anyone question the legitimacy or correctness of the widespread concerns among U.S. bishops, Pope Francis issued a letter affirming their alarm and implicitly scolding them for failing to speak out more forcefully. In an eloquent and highly unusual communication, he pleaded with U.S. Catholics to reject the narrative upon which the Trump administration is basing its large-scale removal program. Barron might also want to slip into his homily a note of support for Cardinal Robert McElroy, who arrived at the Chancery in Hyattsville, Maryland this week and will be installed later this month as the new Archbishop of Washington. McElroy, in a recent prayer service, condemned this large-scale removal scheme. We must speak up and proclaim that this unfolding misery and suffering, and yes, war of fear, it cannot be tolerated in our midst. End quote. That's just the beginning. They're going to go to the money in just a moment. That's where they go next with this, because this is all that's about: money. The bishops are practically celebrating this judicial activist state declaration by the oh-so-Catholic Amy Coney Barrett, who many of us, myself included, to our shame, were quite happy when she got put on the Supreme Court 5 years ago. They came down and said that the U.S. government has to continue paying for these things, at least for the services already provided. You should read the dissenting opinion on that, by the way. It's scathing, because You cannot find that anywhere in the Constitution. But the U.S. bishops are motivated here by money. That's all this is. That's all this has ever been. And that article goes on to talk about money, 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 money. Here, let me show you. It makes you wonder how much money the National Catholic Reporter has gotten from this. Quote, Barron might also mention the distress of major church organizations, Catholic Relief Services, Catholic Charities, and the United States Office of Jesuit Refugee Services. They can provide compelling and deeply disturbing witness to the devastation and human suffering from the administration's cutoff of foreign aid. We might suggest Barron also refer to the experience of two recent popes, John Paul II and Benedict XVI, who lived under dictators to challenge the administration's distortion of the truth regarding the conflict in the Eastern Europe. This subject is verboten to talk about explicitly on this platform, and warned against Trump's penchant for buddying up with the bad guy in that conflict. End quote. Now, that's not all, though. The modernists in general are just frothing at the mouth about Bishop Robert Barron not deciding to jump in with both feet into secular politics, to not wade into the sewage that is this debate. I'll give you a perfect example here. There's a man by the name of Austin Iveray. He is the professional, as I call him, Francis fan fiction writer. His job is to be the biographer for Pope Francis in the English-speaking world. He's written numerous books on the man, gets private interviews with him, the whole 9 yards. He also has a hobby of going after the traditional Latin Mass when he finds there's a Latin Mass being said in his diocese somewhere that isn't conforming strictly to Traditionis Custodes. He then reports them to the bishop and to Rome. What a nice guy. Here is what he had to say on X. He said Bishop Barron was at Trump's joint address. He was so disturbed by what he saw as the Democrats' refusal to take part in the liturgy of democracy of the event. He wasn't disturbed by Trump's assault on democracy, despite being there, he says, as an advocate of Catholic social teaching. End quote. Right. He's not the only one who had some rather silly hot take. See, a guy named Tony Annett, who is a European Catholic, we'll put in quotes, who works with a lot of these worldwide nonprofit organizations that are subverting democracy in places all over the world. He had this to say in response to what the professional Francis fan fiction writer had to say. And this is another person with a lot of influence. He's met Pope Francis personally. He has a lot of sway. He says Barron is an utter disgrace. He also hobnobs with Jordan Peterson, a thermometer problem refuser who calls the Pope a demon. Oh, how dare he? How dare he not be a fan of Pope Francis? But that's what we're dealing with here, folks. Again, I have never denied the fact that I'm not the biggest fan of Bishop Robert Barron. My issues with him are on theology, and I don't deny at the same time that a lot of people learn a lot about Catholicism from him, and good on him for that. I just wish that his theology was more consistent with pre-conciliar teachings on the faith. But that's another discussion for another time. Going after Bishop Robert Barron because he won't stand up against big bad orange man in the White House is a problem. And because it gives away the game of what the modernists are doing. They are so desperate for their federal funding to be restored that they are willing to burn bridges. They're willing to politicize the faith in ways that are breathtaking. They are on the verge of being nakedly partisan. Do not be shocked if in 2026, in the run-up to the midterm elections, you start having people, cardinals, bishops, high-profile lay Catholics, going out there and saying you need to get rid of the president's party in the White House and put back in the people who hate literally everything Catholics stand for so we can have our money back. When you parse their actual argument, do not be shocked when this comes to pass. I'm curious what you have to say about this, so let me know in the comments, please. Are you that surprised to see that they are all worked up in a lather over the issue of money? Let me know in the comments, please. Like and subscribe if you haven't. It certainly helps. Sharing this on social media helps too. And if you've ever thought about supporting the work of Return to Tradition, there are options in the description box below, Patreon, Subscribe Star, that kind of thing. Or you can hit that join button below. They help keep these daily messages coming. Lots of options available for people as requested by viewers like you. Thanks very much for tuning in today. And as always, pray for the church. I'm Anthony Stine. Ave Maria.